Okay, welcome back, everybody. I'd like to reopen regular council meeting number 1542. And once again, in honor of the Liwatul, the Village of Pemberton acknowledges that we're meeting within the unceded territory of the Liwa Nation. For those members of the public in attendance, please note that this meeting is a live webinar and is being recorded. A recording of the meeting will be available on the village's website following the meeting. Are there any changes to the agenda? Seeing none, can I get a motion to approve the agenda as presented? Councillor Noble, seconded by Present. Any discussion? Any opposed? Motion carries. So to start things off, we're going to go right into our public information session on the 2019 and 2020 annual report. Do you need to do any technical setup here? Or can I roll right into it? Good.
No, I don't think so.
Okay. So for those in attendance who wish to provide, oh, sorry, that's after the presentation. So I will turn it over for the presentation.
I believe that's me.
Please.
So good evening, Your Worship and Mayor and Council. Thank you for having me. I am here to present the 2019 and 2020 annual reports. Under the community charter, a municipality or local government is to present each year prior to June 30th an annual report, or make available prior to June 30th annual report on the to cover the municipal activities for the previous year. Unfortunately, last year we were unable to complete our annual report because of COVID, and the restructure of adjusting duties prevented us from being able to fully complete it. So this year we are presenting the annual reports for both 2019 and 2020. And the annual report includes the audited annual financial statements, which Council has already received both for 2019 and 2020. It outlines the tax exemptions provided by Council through a permissive tax exemption. It also includes a report respecting the municipal services and operations for the previous year, and a progress report respecting the previous year relations to objectives and measures established for that year, as well as the current year we're in and the year to come. We are also to provide any declarations of disqualifications, which there have been none over the last 2 years, and a statement of municipal objectives and measures that will be used to determine progress of those objectives for the current and next year. So what we've done this year, we've taken a bit of a different approach, and we've looked at it from the standpoint of Council's strategic priorities. There were a number of strategic priorities set in 2019. And in 2020, those priorities were expanded upon a little bit. So we identified, in previous years, what we've done is sort of taken it by department and looked at our strategic priorities, the themes that we've had in place. But this year we made a bit of a shift and looked at it just from the strategic priorities that were set. And then we also looked at it from a departmental operational priority list that we've established, that staff has established at our level, but using Council's priorities as well. So the priorities that we've been reported out on over 2019 and 2020 are economic development strategy, the OCP, official community plan update, affordable housing, hillside development standards, First Nations shared services, water and sewer, asset management, municipal facilities, single-use plastic bag bylaw, daycare expansion, community climate action plan, soccer field number 1, emergency management, flood response, improved monitoring for flood and landslides, transfer of recreation services from the SLRD to the village, and IAP2 implementation. So as we move through the annual report, we'll show under these different areas where we have either completed an initiative, or we're midway through an initiative, or where we are in the process. If you want me to go through them all, I can, but I think that the report speaks for itself and gives a good overview of everything that we at the staff level have been doing to move Council's priorities and initiatives forward. You will note that there are some that are in a holding pattern, and that is in some cases related to the COVID pandemic and changes that have happened as a result of the staff workload and reallocation of staff. But we will be moving back and bringing those forward as we continue on, as we get through the recovery stage and get back to normal. This year, we also added in some interesting statistics, sort of bits and pieces of information that we thought that might be helpful for the municipality or for the residents of the community to know about, and little things like how many kilometers of roads we have, and infrastructure bits and pieces, interesting tidbits of information. And we included a COVID-19 timeline. So this sets out basically from when the pandemic was declared, or the first presumptive case, through what we processed through in 2020. And this timeline will actually continue in our 2021 annual report as we report out over this year's activities related to COVID. And it was an opportunity to give sort of a bit of a breakdown of where the province made announcements and the municipality's response to those announcements. We include in the annual report information related to each department and the activities of each department. And we picked, as we were going through that, some of the highlights of what the operational work plans were and the priorities that were established through our different departments, and reported out on where those projects stand. And then we also provide information related to grant funding received in both 2019 and 2020, and list out the permissive tax exemptions as per the requirement. And that is about it. Does anybody have any questions?
Thank you, Ms. Fraser. Any questions? We appear to have lost Councillor Craddock.
Oh.
Unless he's just off videoed. Is staff aware? Oh, he's back. Okay. Any questions on Ms. Fraser's presentation? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to open up to the public. So for those in attendance who wish to provide comment or ask a question regarding the 2019-2020 annual reports, please click on the raise hand feature in the webinar controls. This will notify staff that you would like to ask a question. Village staff will announce your name when it is your turn. You'll be able to unmute your microphone. Please be reminded that only comments directly related to the 2019 and 2020 annual report are permitted. Is there anybody in the gallery with a hand up?
Yeah, Richmond, there are no hands raised.
All right. I'll give it a second, and thank you for the presentation, Ms. Fraser, and for all the staff putting the report together. I know it's a lot of work, and I really hope people do access it. I think it really does give a good, complete, or fairly complete snapshot of all the work that goes on behind the scenes. You know, some things hit the headlines, some things catch the attention of our residents, others just go unnoticed, understandably. But I think there's been a lot of work done over the last couple of years, and a lot of really good activities, and they warrant celebration, they warrant acknowledgement, and a lot of hard work's gone into it. So thank you for the report. I think it was very thorough. I think it's great. I hope people take the time to look at it. Any comments? Still no hands up, Ms. Kennedy. Then we will look for a motion to receive the annual reports, please. Councillor Craddock, seconded by Councillor Zant. Further discussion? Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, number 6, adoption of minutes from regular council meeting number 154 from Tuesday, June 15th. And from 1541 from Tuesday, June 29th. Moved by Councillor Noble, seconded by Councillor Zant. Discussion? Any opposed? Motion carries. Any business arising? Seeing none, rise with report from the camera. Give me a second here. We do have a quick one. I just need to queue it up. So at the in-camera meeting held earlier today, council rose with a report on the following. Stewardship Pemberton Nature Center lease agreement. It was moved and seconded that the lease agreement between the village and Stewardship Pemberton for a small area within 1 Mile Lake Park that houses the nature center be renewed for a 10-year term with one 10-year renewal, and that Mayor and Chief Administrative Officer be authorized to sign the lease agreement on behalf of the village. And it was moved and seconded that staff be directed to issue a notice of disposition respecting the lease of the lands to Stewardship Pemberton, and that staff be directed to prepare a permissive tax exemption bylaw for consideration by council. Business arising from committee of the whole, we have none, no committee minutes, no delegations. So we're on to number 12, reports. This is the Office of the CAO, verbal report, and the CL Gilmore.
Yes, hello. I have one item that was attached. I received a letter from the BC Emergency Health Services. It was addressed to myself, so that's why I've attached it as correspondence under this section, as opposed to a letter to Mayor and Council, which would be further below under correspondence. I think it just sort of reflects, or it's trying to identify some of the changes that have been made with ambulance. I know we discussed this, and we've also identified this as an item to be brought forward to UBCM. So I really just brought this forward for council's information. I think too, we all heard, thoughts and concerns about what July might look like for ambulance shortage. And it was interesting because there is a little snippet, and it was actually profiled on Global that, for Pemberton specific, we were minus 73 ambulances. It says I'm assuming calls, 140 unstaffed shifts and 17 days without an overnight ambulance. So, I'm not sure what else we can do other than trying to have a further conversation with our MLA. But I think as we venture more into summer and with more people entering into our area, we're definitely going to see more and more of an impact in our region.
So Ms. Gilmore, with this letter, what was unclear to me, it talks about how it's going to create more full-time positions and sort of.
Well, it does.
Sets the scene that way. It doesn't, bottom line, result in a net decrease in the service levels that we're going to see here.
They're discussing staffing levels and service levels as two entirely separate components. So it has to do with their response time and having people on call during the night, and a 90-second. I'm sure the chief who's on next can prepare or has more information at his fingertips. But typically those on-call hours have been more transferred into full-time hours. So that response though isn't there in the evenings. Right. So you don't have to be at the hall during that time.
So those service levels in the evenings and beyond regular business hours, those service levels have decreased with this plan.
Yes, for our area in particular.
Yeah, for our area, yeah.
It does increase full-time positions, but otherwise those were already covered. They just weren't in a full-time position capacity, is I think where we're missing the information is a little misleading.
Okay. I have some thoughts, but I'll open it to council here. Any thoughts or comments, or questions? Okay, with that, with what was just said in terms of potential decrease in the evening hours of service, recognizing the amount of traffic we get through here, especially in the summer months, like you said, I don't know where to go further. We've requested a meeting at UBCM. What other formal avenues do we have to make our case? Go ahead, Ms. Gilmore.
I did forget to mention that between our three jurisdictions, being the Village, SLRD, and Lillooet, we are arranging a meeting with BC Ambulance at the end of August, unfortunately, to have a conversation about this. It just all had to do with timelines and availability. So that's something we're doing from a staff perspective. But unless we were to potentially try to arrange a meeting with our MLA, and that's the only thing I can see at this point.
These enhancements, which I love the fact that they're called enhancements in the letter, these enhancements to emergency health services in our community, when did they start?
I believe they started in July, but I could be misquoting.
We don't meet till August.
And this letter also says May 23rd, but I received it in June. So I believe that there was a misprint on the date. I believe it was supposed to be June 23rd, not May 23rd.
Right. Okay, well, I'm totally happy to keep following this up with the MLA. I don't know if there's any other thoughts from council in terms of how we would like to continue pursuing this. The CO's got a meeting at the end of August. I don't know if there's anything else we'd like to see in the meantime, but I'm certainly concerned about a lowering in service levels on the evening hours when we're that busy around here. So, any thoughts? Councillor Craddock, go ahead.
Thanks, Mayor Richmond. I just wonder, so that we have a paper trail, if a letter to the ministry and to the ambulance service prior to us meeting with the minister in September would be a good thing to do, just to make sure they've got a heads up. I know the administrator's been talking to people, but obviously if it comes from mayor and council, maybe it will add a little strength to that.
To the BC Emergency Health Services, is that what you're suggesting? A letter to them?
Correct. And we could CC our MLA and the minister.
So basically, you're suggesting a motion to send a letter to BC Emergency Health Services outlining our concerns around reduced services in the evening hours and whatever else we identify through some work through staff. I guess end of sentence.
I'd make that motion if it's appropriate, Mayor.
I'll second it.
Any further discussion? CO Gilmore, any staff thoughts on that?
No, I think we have some information based on the previous documents or information the chief has compiled, and we can put together a letter.
Okay. I'll call the question then. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. So next up, we're on Pemberton Fire Rescue. We're going to wait for our fire chief to join us. Oh, there he is. Good evening, Chief Grossman. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, for having me.
Welcome. We're happy for you to take it over and talk to us about your annual reports for 2019-2020.
Okay, thanks. So I could go through all 40 some pages of the report, but I'm just going to highlight the stuff because I know you've had a long day. So in 2019, I'm just going to hit it. We had promotion of Cameron Adams from volunteer paid on call firefighter to full-time deputy fire chief of fire prevention and training. So that was a big plus for us. In 2019, we also saw retirements of Jason Pospisil, 17 years on Pemberton Fire. Dominic Morin had 4 years of service, and Talia Stovall had 1 year of service. The awards and recognitions we had for 2019 were Firefighter of the Year was given to Josh Livermore. Rookie of the Year was given to Kaylee Wilkes. Most Improved Firefighter of the Year was given to Jordan Brown. And the Outstanding Firefighter, and this one is for the most calls attended and the most training attended, was given to Simone Yagley. And she's a 9-10 year member as well. So, and then paid on call firefighter Chris Kirchner, who was also a lieutenant, had met his 5 years of service with Pemberton Fire Rescue. For 2019, we did 452.25 hours of incidents, 195.5 hours of training, 104 hours of public education events and requests from the public to have fire department available and at events. And the fire officers attended an additional 773 hours of standby time on average. In 2019, we also hit a high of 459 calls for the year. So then I'm going to go down to 2020. We had retirements for 2020. Kyle Bubbs, 18 years of fire service. Sarah Taves joined the fire department. Partly she was emergency coordinator and fire admin. And when she took on the full-time role of the emergency coordinator, she had to step away from fire because emergency for 2020 was a little bit crazy. Craig Blaney of 3 years retired. Lisa Graham Knight, 2 years of service, and Robin Paxton, 1 year of service. So those are all the ones that we lost during 2020. Firefight, we're going to awards and recognition. Firefighter of the year was Paul Quinlan, who joined in 2019. Rookie of the year was Mike Zagood. Most improved firefighter of the year was Lloyd Nicefurrow. Outstanding firefighter of the year for most attendance at training and incidents was Paul Quinlan as well. Incident training was 355 hours. Training or incidents was 355 hours. Training was 296 hours. We had public education of 24 hours, and most of that was at the beginning of the year, January and February, before COVID came into play. And then standby time for officers was 941 hours. So these additional volunteer hours are put in while maintaining full-time jobs as well as family and other commitments. The dedication and commitment to each member of Pembina Fire Rescue gives to the department as well as the community is very much appreciated. And residents should be proud of the commitment these members provide. Other than that, that's all my highlights. The rest of it's in the report, which I could get into details, but it's also in the annual report as well. So that's all that I have at this time.
Thank you, Chief. Any questions? Councillor Craddock, go ahead.
Well, thank you. The chief just forgot to mention that the Governor General Award for Fire Service Exemplary Service Medal is what was presented to him this year. So my congratulations to you, Chief, and we're very pleased to have you on our department and leading a great volunteer organization. So thank you very much for that and congratulations.
Thank you, Councillor Craddock.
Definitely. Go ahead, Councillor Antonelli.
Just a quick question. Do we have any access to search dogs?
No, that comes from RCMP. If they require a search dog, it comes from RCMP.
Right, so there's no local training or anyone on the volunteer groups with that?
Not with Pembina Fire, there's no one that does the volunteer side. Search and rescue, I haven't heard of anyone. And I've talked to Mike Hamilton from RCMP, and he says that they bring their people up from Vancouver for search dogs. So if there's a request or a requirement, they come up.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Thank you, Chief Grossman. We'll get a motion to receive in a second, but thank you for the report. And again, it outlines a lot of the work that all you guys do. And I was going to mention later my mayor's report, but while we have you on the line, all the firefighters and fire and rescue crew that jumped in there with the high water potential and the flood potential, it was nice to know that all of you are out there and great job. And please pass that along because I know there was a lot of hours put in on that.
Will do. Thank you very much.
Can I please get a motion to receive Chief Grossman's annual reports? Councillor Craddock, seconded by Councillor Noble. Further discussion? Any opposed? Motion carries. Have a good night.
Thank you.
So we're going to wait for Ms. Martin to join us again. And Ms. Gilmore, is this Ms. Martin's last report to us?
Yes, it will be. No, sorry. It depends if we have anything on the 27th.
We do. We have Q2.
Okay, yes, we have one more report.
One more big one coming.
Okay, we'll embarrass you then.
The embarrassment continues. Come on.
Just, keep thinking about it. We're on to the 2020 Statement of Financial Information. I'll turn it over to Ms. Martin.
All right. Well, good evening to Mayor and Council. I'm here to provide the Council with the 2020 Statement of Financial Information for review and approval. The Financial Information Act requires local governments to prepare a statement of financial information to be filed with the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing following receipt of the audited financial statements. The 2020 SOFI has been prepared as prescribed by the Lieutenant Governor and Council, and it's been approved by the Manager of Finance as required by legislation. This SOFI will include the audited annual consolidated financial reports for 2020, a schedule of payment to suppliers over and above $25,000, and a schedule of remuneration and expenses for council and for employees earning over $75,000 in the year. The SOFI has been prepared from the financial records of the village in accordance with the FIA and regulations. If you'd like to go over the SOFI report, we can look at it independently. Just look over some highlights.
Sure, let's
The
hit
main
the
highlights
top of the
of
wave.
this would, so on the appendix that is the SOFI report, starting on page 4. I'm not sure what that is in the agenda. Let's look.
Is this the statement of goods?
So starting with the schedule showing the remuneration.
90, page 90.
Okay, so as we can see there, we have our remuneration for council and council expenses. There's very minor expenses this year. For 2020, we had a few meeting expenses in the beginning of the year. And then when budget was passed, council determined that they didn't need snacks anymore. And we were going to cancel all scheduled in-house meetings. So there was a big drop in the cost for that. So they're just some minor charges for expenditures. And there was obviously a lack of going to any conferences in person. So there were no charges for hotel or charges for heading to LGMA, those kind of things for 2020. We would expect this to be much higher for 2021, hopefully on your way back to normal. And then your average earners over 75,000. Some of these are inclusive of wage and maybe some additional payments. So some of this isn't just straight salary. It's what we have to report as taxable salary. So for instance, if an employee left in the year and took their vacation pay, that would also be included in this value. It's not necessarily what they make annually. So just wanted to point that out. There are some people in here that would have that situation. And then again, we have expenditures for those earners over 75,000, rather small, not a lot of conferences or training that we had time for in 2020. And then beneath that is everybody under 75,000 is combined as a gross value. So we have our total employees value and our total expenses value. And that would be for different online work that our multiple employees put together over the year. And then we have some reconciling items on the bottom. So when we do our T4s, there are some items that are paid by the employee. So those are reconciled on the bottom. Things like municipal pension and WCB, EI, CPP, they have some balance sheet equations that don't show up in this report. So then we can move on to the schedule that shows our suppliers, our trade suppliers that are earned over $25,000 in the year. And this is just a breakout supply to show that we have multiple trades, not just one or two, and shows the larger earners. Obviously, we also include other governments. So the largest payments are for taxes collected for other governments, and also benefits suppliers like Municipal Pension and Pacific Blue Cross. Are there any questions on any of these trades? Okay, so moving on then, we do a reconciliation to our financial statements. and, oh, I don't have my little side notes up, but so we reconcile to the value of trade payments and payroll and reconcile that against our expenses noted on our operation statement. So reconciling items are things like wages that don't show up in the trade, employee and council portions that were paid, such as tax, CPP, EI, that we paid to the supplier, but it's not expensed on our books because it's paid by the employee. And transfers to other governments are not expensed by us. They go through the balance sheet and other balance sheet and balancing items. We also have balancing items for trades that get expensed in one year and paid in the following year and vice versa. So there's always a variable of timing in these as well. And then principal debt payments are not expensed, though they are paid to trade. They are moved to the balance sheet to offset a liability or moved into assets. Are there any questions? Okay. And then we did not have any severance agreements in 2020, and that just remains with our management report that went with our financial statements. And that's it.
Very much, Ms. Martin. Any questions? Comments? No. Thank you for the presentation. Seeing no questions, can I get a motion to approve the 2020 SOFI report? Councillor Noble, seconded by Councillor Zant. Further discussion? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Martin. I think we're done with you for this evening. Have a great night. And no, she's already gone. Look at that. Wow. Someone had somewhere to go. Okay, we're on to development services. We're going to wait for some staff to join us. Good evening, Mr. Chalmers and Ms. Pedrini. Thank you for joining us. When you're all set up, we are ready to talk about the DVP number 130 for Sunstone Ridge Development.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening, Council. The report before you tonight is for consideration of development variance permit number 130. This has been submitted by Sunstone Ridge Developments for what they're referring to as phase 1C and D. Those will be two phases. Phase C is proposed as 14 lots, 14 newly created lots with an extension of Cerulean Drive. Phase D does not have an application pending, but is considered to be another future extension of Cerulean Drive. So this variance would have the effect of covering the road standards for the next two phases of phase 1C, both of which represent an extension of Cerulean Drive. Just quickly in terms of background, in November 2014, Council approved the initial development variance permit for Sunstone Ridge Developments to allow for alternate road standards to accommodate the hillside conditions. Largely, these are outlined in a table later in the report, but they're things that you commonly see in hillside development, such as narrower road widths, sometimes different approaches to stormwater management and drainage. And the intent of this report is to ensure that the extension of Cerulean Drive matches the previously approved and constructed portion of Cerulean Drive. So in essence, this is a fairly straightforward request that will have the next two stages of Cerulean match the first stage. In the report, the reason this report is coming before you is that these are lands that were acquired from the ridge. So Cerulean extends beyond what was initially the Sunstone boundaries. Because the initial development variance permit was limited only to the Sunstone lands, there's a requirement for us to issue a separate development variance permit on lands that were formerly under control of the ridge. In terms of the substantive considerations in the variance, they're outlined in a table in the report. The first one is road width. A minimum standard established by bylaw is 20 or 21 meters. The proposed variance is 18. The bylaw standard for sidewalks finishing in width is a 1.5 meter paved walkway on road. The proposed variance is a 1 meter gravel curb. Street parking requirements are 2.5 meters of laned on-street parking. The variance request is for no street parking. Emergency access road paved is the bylaw standard, gravel is the proposed standard. And the total asphalt width or the carriageway of the road, the bylaw standard would range between 8.1 and 10.6 meters. And the proposal is for 6.6 meters. There's a couple other variances that need to be included. The maximum cul-de-sac length of 150 meters is a bylaw standard. The phase D will require a variance of 400 meters. This is something that will be offset by emergency access roads provided, and we just discussed the variance required for those. So staff are satisfied with that extension. And mid-block turnarounds, they are required by bylaw, and the application is to not require mid-block turnarounds. That we do understand there may be some opportunity to incorporate those as shown in the subdivision plan. So with that, Mr. Mayor, the proposed variance, development variance permit is attached to the report. If you have any comments or questions on that, I would be happy to receive them before you hear from the applicant and the public, should there be an interest in speaking. But just to summarize, really this is a development variance permit that will continue the road in the standard that it's already built in, and staff are therefore recommending approval.
Thank you, Mr. Chalmers. I will be opening this to the public in a moment. So right now I'd like to turn it to council for questions. Any questions? Councilor Craddock, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks very much. Thanks, Mr. Chalmers, for the report. Just looking at the plan ahead of me on page 129, I'm taking a look. Where is the turnaround for fire department purposes where lot 18 is?
Mr. Mayor, through you, the current application would stop at lot 13. That's phase 1C. Phase 1D, there's no turnaround shown at this stage because we do not have an active subdivision application. I believe the intent is that you can see it kind of banks to the north and then back to the south. That would be an emergency access road. And if that road is built to an appropriate standard when that phase of subdivision is considered, then it would not necessarily need a turnaround. So we haven't dealt with the extent of the subdivision requirements on phase 1D. We do not yet have an application, but for 1C, there will be a temporary turnaround you can see between lots 9, 10, and 13.
Then just to follow up on that, because that road was not planned to continue through there on the first subdivision agreement, I believe. What is the general feeling from the neighbors that have already purchased lot as far as quite a bit of additional traffic down that area?
Mr. Mayor, through you, just to be clear, the intent of the road extension that you see connecting back to Pemberton Farm Road East would be limited to emergency access. So we suspect it would be gated at the time that that's dealt with in future phases. The subdivision, the land has zoning. The subdivision has not received any negative feedback as far as I'm aware. I can confirm with the approving officer, but about the extension of Cerulean Drive we have not heard feedback one way or the other on the additional lots being proposed.
Okay, thank you. And people have been advised of the extension of the road, have they?
Mr. Mayor, through you, there's no obligation on behalf of the municipality to include or to notify residents of subdivision applications. As you know, they're not discretionary considerations by the approving officer. So we haven't actively consulted with the community, but I believe that there has been some preliminary clearing and other works happening in that area. And we have not received, as far as I'm aware, any concerns or negative feedback.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions from council? Go ahead, Councilor Antonelli.
Outside of this application, have there been any comments about the existing width of road and the amount of parking available for guests? Because I know in other neighborhoods in Pemberton, we've had issues.
Mr. Mayor, through you, I may have to defer to staff on that. I personally have not heard anything, but again, this is at the very early stages. Homes are just currently being constructed. I don't think we're approaching the level of build out where we would anticipate to receive those concerns just yet. But perhaps if staff have heard otherwise, they can provide comment.
Any further input from staff?
I can just, sorry, confirm we've received no complaints.
And maybe a follow-up, actually, sorry, Councillor Antonelli, did you want to follow up first of all?
Well, I have some comments. Are we at comments?
No, let's stick with
time,
questions
or
for a
shall I
moment.
wait?
We're going to stick with questions, and once we're done questions, I'll open it to the public, and then we'll go back to comments. My question, kind of an extension of Councillor Antonelli's, with what has been approved in the past, are there any concerns, or can you maybe clarify for people if they're how fire and public works feel about those road standards in terms of snow clearing and fire access, fire response access?
Mr. Mayor, through you, again, I may have to defer to staff who work more closely with those departments. I just will speak to the intent of the variance for both the parking and the narrow road standard. It's not an unprecedented or unusual standard on a hillside to make attempts to minimize the amount of cutting and filling and clearing that's required. There's a visual component, there's slope stability considerations, and it's a standard approach. But as to the specific concerns of Pemberton Fire and operations, perhaps I'll defer to staff.
Ms. Gilmore?
I think I would sort of continue on with the theme that Mr. Chalmers brought forward about being new in the development. We took over snow clearing of that section of Cerulean in February. So there wasn't a significant amount of snow. We have not had a discussion. And as far, I don't believe there have been any fire calls in that area either. So I don't think it's been tested as much as it would be if it was more occupied.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other questions? Okay, seeing no questions, I'm going to open it up to the public. So for those in attendance who wish to provide comment or ask a question regarding the, just a cut and paste here, regarding the development variance permit, can click on the raise hand feature in the webinar controls. This will notify staff that you'd like to ask a question. Staff will announce your name when it is your turn, and you'll be able to unmute your microphone. Is there anybody from the public that would like to speak? Kennedy?
There are no raised hands.
All right. If there are no comments from the public, I will open it up to comments for council. Any comments? Councilor Antonelli.
Yeah, I don't oppose the variance. I think you know a standard for these hillside developments is a variance is fine, but I am concerned about just neighborhood-wide parking because you know we've seen this in the benchlands where once everything's built out and everybody's parking the several vehicles they own, there's not a lot of room for guests, and I think we should be thinking more on this topic. So we're getting rid of the on-street parking, but what are we going to do to ensure we don't have the same problems?
Is there a comment from staff on parking?
Mr. Mayor, through you, again, we're following a standard that was established some time ago. I think this will be, again, perhaps a good indicator of where council may ultimately want to land with hillside development standards. Again, there are often opportunities on a site-specific basis to incorporate some street parking. This will probably be a good indicator of whether or not council wants to look at that in the future. This particular application, it hasn't been considered due to the topography and just the continuation of the existing road standard. But if that's a concern of council, I understand there is still an interest in reviewing the subdivision development control bylaw standards in relation to hillsides. Council will be considering other hillside developments, and that's a discussion we would anticipate having through that process as well.
Thank you. Any other comment? Okay, my comments would be that it's a continuation of what has been approved along Cerulean Drive already. So I think it makes sense to carry on that variance, and as we've seen, let's have a look at, and comments brought up, let's have a look at parking concerns and snow clearing and fire to make sure that we're on the right track. But I think as it is a continuation of what's started, I think it makes good sense. So those would be my comments. Would anybody like to make a motion? The recommendation is that council issue the DVP number 113 to establish alternate hillside road standards for Cillian Drive extension. Somebody like to make that motion? Councillor Zant, seconded by Councillor Noble. Further discussion? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Chalmers, for joining us. Have a great evening.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Ms. Pedrini is staying with us. We're on to the official community, the OCP Tayada École de la Vallée, bylaw number 902, and I will turn it over to Ms. Pedrini, I believe.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So I'm here this evening to request Council to formally cancel the public hearing that was scheduled for tonight for the amending bylaws 902 and 903. Due to some events that were occurring in our community in the last couple of weeks with the heat dome and the flooding, as well as just some staff vacation. An ad in the July 1st Peak News magazine was not submitted. And for the public hearing to go ahead, there would have needed to be two ads in two consecutive editions of the Peak. So we missed one of the ads, so we need to formally cancel the public hearing. And when we communicated this with the applicants, they were actually quite relieved because they needed a bit more time in order to secure or to commit to their community amenity contributions, and a bit more work was needed on their part. So they actually asked if we could reschedule the public hearing to September 21st. And since that is a council meeting that begins at 5:30, we would just reschedule the public hearing to that time. So I would need a resolution from council, to that effect.
Thank you, Ms. Virginie. So just to be clear, we're not canceling, we're rescheduling.
Yes. Well, we canceled the one that was meant to be held tonight, a formal cancellation, and then we postpone it and reschedule it for September 21st.
Checking, because I'm a stickler for these formalities here. I want to make sure. I know. Any questions from council? Would somebody like to make that motion? Councillor Noble, seconded by Councillor Craddock. Further discussion? Any opposed? Motion carries.
Okay, much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Virginie. Have a good evening. Okay, we are on to number 13, bylaws. And we're going to be looking at the mobile food vendors bylaw. So I will be excusing myself, and as I'm part owner of a restaurant and a food truck. And so staying consistent, I will be excusing myself, and I believe Councillor Zant will be taking the acting mayor and chair's role. Sorry, I know I should know this by now. Am I leaving the meeting, or am I just taking my video on mute off?
I will put you in the waiting room.
Okay, thank you. So I don't do anything.
Nope.
I guess at this point, staff is going to present on the business bylaw amendment number 855, food vendors.
Yes, that's me. Good evening, Acting Mayor and Council. Thank you for taking the time to hear my report. The purpose of this report is to present to Council Business License Amendment Mobile Food Vendors Bylaw number 904, 2021 for first, second, and third readings. At regular council meeting number 1538 held on May 11th, 2021, council approved the mobile food vendor pilot program policy that would allow mobile food vendors to operate at selected public locations for the summers of 2021 and 2022. And as council is aware, the number of business licenses available for temporary commercial vendors and food truck operators is limited to 5 in a calendar year. At the time the policy was approved, 2 licenses remain available for participants in the pilot program and for any other temporary mobile vendors seeking to operate on private lands. Since then, staff have received applications from 2 vendors in response to the request for expression of interest for the pilot program, and 1 applicant was successful and has received their mobile food vendor permit and their business license for 2021. The second applicant has not yet completed their application and has indicated that they will apply again in 2022 if they're not able to fill the requirements this summer. Staff have also issued a temporary mobile vendor business license to a fruit stand vendor operating on private lands. So under business license bylaw number 855, 2019, any additional applicants for temporary or mobile vendor licenses will not receive business licenses in 2021. So staff are suggesting an amendment to business license bylaw 855, 2019 that would exempt participants in the mobile vendor pilot program from the cap on business licenses for temporary and mobile vendors. And this would allow full participation in the pilot program and would reserve the 5 temporary mobile vendor licenses for vendors operating on private lands, as has been the case in the past. The proposed amendment was advertised in Peak News Magazine on July 1st and July 8th, and notice was provided on public notice boards, the village website, and the Facebook page. 1 letter was received from a resident and business owner opposing the pilot program and the exemption to the cap on mobile and temporary licenses. The recommendation of the report is that business license amendment, mobile food vendors bylaw number 904, 2021 receive first, second, and third readings. This concludes my report. I would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Any questions, Councillor Craddock?
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you for the report. Under discussions and comments, I'm just looking through the part where you're talking about exempting participants of the mobile food vendor pilot program from the cap. Give me a rundown on what you're talking. Are we saying that the 5 permanent ones are going to still be in place and we're going to add another 5 temporary?
Through the acting mayor, the plan was that we would exempt them from the limit so that participants in the pilot program would not be subject to the cap, and those 5 licenses would remain available to mobile and temporary vendors who are not part of the pilot program.
So what are the numbers at the present time?
At the present time for mobile food vendors under the pilot program, we have 1 applicant that has acquired a license, and we had a second applicant who may not fulfill their application this summer. They're not yet ready, and that's it. We've just had those 2 applicants.
Oh, so if I might, through acting mayor, I guess what I'm trying to get to, if you don't mind, Ms. Candy, is how many total licenses will be available between the 2 available licenses?
Through the mayor, we weren't anticipating putting a number on that, although it certainly could be limited. The idea was to encourage full participation in the pilot program since it runs just for the 2 summers, but we hadn't placed a limit on how many could participate in the pilot program, other than there is a somewhat of a built-in limit because of the number of locations and times available for operating.
Okay, I thought we had put a number on it at the previous meeting that there would be maximum of 5 in the community.
Through the mayor, I wasn't aware of that number.
Ms. Fraser?
If I think I can clarify, we have a maximum of 5 mobile vendor business licenses available per year. And at the time that we brought the pilot project forward, we had 2 of those still available. Now, if anybody were to come forward through this pilot program, we would not be able to issue them a business license. So they would not be able to participate because we have maxed out on the 5 vendor, the 5 temporary or mobile vendor business licenses. So basically we're closing down that pilot program if we do not create an exemption in the bylaw to allow for people who are participating in the mobile vendor, the food truck program. We didn't put a limit on the number of those, but as council may recall, the program is restricted to local people only. But right now, if we were to have 2 or 3 people say we're interested in doing it, we've got a food truck, we'd like to be out and at Dendorf Park or 1 Mile Lake Park or whatever, we'd have to say, I'm sorry, we can't, there are no more business licenses available. We can't, the pilot project's basically closed for new applicants, having
Okay,
just been
I-
opened.
And I guess I just want to follow up on that because I thought we had limited it to a total of 5, and I'm certainly unsure that I'm willing to completely open it up to have 6, 8, or maybe 10 people in the community having food trucks. I don't see that as advantageous to the local businesses.
Well, there's a difference between the mobile food trucks that are located on private land versus the ones that would be available on public land. And right now, we only have 1 license that is allowing that. So what we would be doing is opening up the opportunity for a food vendor to participate at 1 Mile Lake Park or the industrial park or one of the 4 locations that has been identified in the pilot project, the pilot program, which has been established for 2 years. So we would be effectively, if we don't open it up to some degree, provide an exemption for people in the pilot project, we should probably be looking at closing that program and
Okay,
not
and
pursuing it.
I guess through Acting Mayor Zant, I guess for me, then I would like to see us put a number on those licenses rather than just leaving it open. It's, yeah, I know it's just a 2-year pilot project, but I'm a little bit concerned if we get 6 or 8 people come in that want to get licenses. There's no way that under this bylaw that we can say no. So I'm a little concerned about the numbers. Thank you.
Councilor Noble, and then Ms. Gilmore.
Thank you. I was just thinking it would make sense to match the number of available licenses to the number of available spots for the pilot program.
Could certainly look at doing that. There's 4 locations. Industrial Park, Dendorf Park, the Pemberton Community Center parking lot, and 1 Mile Lake Park. We could exempt it to be for up to 4 under the pilot program.
Thank you, Ms. Fraser. Ms. Gilmore, you had your hand up.
That's okay. I think that Councilor Noble's question answered what I was going to ask.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Antonelli.
Yeah, can you remind me, are the vendors able to go to several different locations? It might make sense to be at the lake one afternoon and then, in the industrial park a different afternoon.
Ms. Kennedy?
Yeah, through the mayor. Yes, we set up the program similar to the way the program Whistler works so that they can sign up for different locations and different days. So although, as Ms. Fraser mentioned, we have only 4 locations, they could choose to do Tuesdays at the park and Wednesdays at the industrial park and that kind of arrangement. It was intended that way so that they could have an opportunity to try different locations and see which one suited their product better and their presentation. So yes, they can move around. And in fact, the one licensed applicant is doing that. They have 2 locations that they use.
But just to clarify, they wouldn't be there at the same time.
No, they wouldn't.
Okay, I do think that we should limit the number of people that can apply to the pilot program. Sorry. Yeah, I think if we don't limit it, there's too much competition. That said, we just set this up and I don't want to see it shut down immediately. So I think we should pick a number. How many more food trucks do we want to see in the village? I would throw out there 2 more and just see how that goes.
Thank you, Councilor Antonelli. So basically what I'm hearing from council is that we want to tag a number to these permits. I've heard number 5 to match up with the business licenses. Does anybody want to alter the recommendation to suit that? Council Noble,
I'll make the motion.
and is there a seconder to the motion?
So can I just get some clarification? You're limiting the number of food trucks to outside or for the pilot project to 5? Pilot program to 5?
That's the way I understand it from
Okay.
what council is looking for, yes.
That the food truck, okay, pilot project, business license limited to 5, okay.
Did Councilor Antonelli?
There's 4 locations, and it sounds like the trucks are going to want to move among them. So is 5 too high? You know, if we're looking at the comments we received and the concern about competition right when the restaurants are trying to get going again, I'm just wondering if others think 5 is too high.
Any other comments from Councilor Noble?
I'd be fine with making it match the number of spots. So if it's 4 spots, 4 permits.
Councilor Craddock?
Yeah, I certainly don't want to see 10 trucks in the community, potentially 10 if there's 5 and another 5. I know I've heard 2, I've heard 5, now I've heard 4. I guess we're up for auction right now, so I'm not sure what the proper number is. Acting Mayor, what is your feeling on this?
Well, I would feel that at this point, you're right, we've gone from 2, 5 to 4, and at this point, I would say leave it at 4. And go from there. So we've got motion on the table for 5. We need to rescind that motion. and put it at
You
4.
can just make a friendly amendment to move it from 5 to 4 if you wish.
Yeah, there was no seconder anyway.
No.
So the motion would be to have 4 permits in the pilot program. Does anybody want to make that motion?
I'll make the motion.
The motion's been made by Council Noble, or is it a seconder? Councilor Antonelli, is that a second? Thank you. So call the questions or comments? Call the question. All opposed? Councilor Craddock, that's opposed. Motion passes.
So we do need to amend the bylaw and give it for 2nd and 3rd reading with as amended.
As amended.
Yeah. So it would be that the business license bylaw number 855-219 amendment mobile food vendors bylaw number 904 received for 2nd and 3rd readings as amended.
And that has to be the motion.
Yes.
Pardon?
And that is the motion then?
Yes, we would amend it. Now you've given us direction to
Yeah.
limit the number to 4. And so that's a resolution. We'll amend the bylaw. And the bylaw would be given for a 2nd, 3rd reading as amended to accommodate 4 business licenses for the pilot project only.
Does somebody want to make that motion then? Council Noble? And seconder? Councilor Antonelli? Questions or comments? Call the question. All opposed? Councilor Craddock?
Would you like that noted, Councillor Craddock?
Sure. Thank you.
And motion passes.
Good job, Acting Mayor Zant.
You're too kind, Councilor Craddock. Quickly, get Mike back in here.
Oh, yeah. Pressure.
That mean I'm welcome back?
Yes, you're back in the chair, Mayor Richmond.
Mayor Zant did a good job, but yes, welcome back.
All right, well, I could miss the rest. Great. So that takes us on to Village of Pemberton fees and charges bylaw number 905. Ms. Kennedy will be presenting this.
Yes, this is one from me again. And again, thank you for taking the time to hear my second report. The purpose of this report is to present the proposed fees and charges bylaw number 905, 2021 to council for first, second, and third readings. The fees and charges bylaw amalgamates all fees, charges, and deposits except for taxes, water and sewer rates, and development cost charges into one bylaw for ease of use by staff and residents. The proposed bylaw includes the consequential amendments to the source bylaws, removing the schedules for fees and adding reference instead to the new fees and charges bylaw. Also, administrative fees bylaw number 721, 2012 was integrated into the new bylaw and will be repealed by it. Administrative and financial fees were reviewed in comparison to similar fees charged by other municipalities. Some minor changes were made, but primarily just in the way of simplifying the fee structure, removing fees for services that are no longer offered and adding fees for new services such as GIS and digital data. And fees for some printing and photocopying services were increased slightly to align with other municipalities. While this was not intended to be a full review of the source bylaws, some errors were corrected and some wording was updated as necessary. And during the review, staff noted that fees were missing for the temporary hydrant use permit and for an inspection required as part of an application for an exemption to interface construction and maintenance regulations. So these two fees were added. Also, during the review of the contributing bylaw, staff found that some bylaws are outdated and need to be amended or replaced. And so these amendments or new bylaws will be brought forward to council as time permits. And this concludes my report. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Ms. Kennedy, any questions? Questions on the report? Any comments? Thank you very much for the report. I know this is something that's been on the work plan for some time, and I think staff's happy to bring it forward and see it come to completion. So thank you for all the work that's gone into this and cleaning this up. If there are no questions or comments, would somebody like to make a motion to give first, second, and third reading of fees and charges bylaw number 905, 2021?
I'll make the motion.
Councillor Noble, seconded by Councillor Craddock. Further discussion? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Kennedy. Again, thank you for the work on this. I know that a lot went into it. Okay, we're on to 14, which is the mayor's report. And I would like to start by extending on behalf of the Village of Pemberton our thoughts, our wishes, our sympathies, our condolences to the residents of Lytton. Homes, businesses, community, and lives lost. I mean, I think we could all just agree that the devastation was absolutely shocking. And I just very much want to extend our thoughts and our good wishes to the folks of Lytton as they look forward. And I also just want to wish everybody luck that are whose homes and communities are threatened by wildfires currently. Unfortunately, we're still at the beginning of the wildfire season, and we see a number of fires burning around the province. So our thoughts are with everybody on that. And as an extension, I really want to offer my gratitude on behalf of all of us to the firefighters out there that are battling these fires under extremely difficult conditions. I've seen and spoken to a number of them over the last weeks, and I can't imagine. I mean, the heat's been incredible. I haven't even wanted to walk my dog in this heat, and these folks are out there battling fires and protecting our communities. So thank you to the firefighters and the emergency workers that are out there on our behalf during this fire season. Kind of similarly, a couple of weeks ago, we had, as we watched the freshet reach its peak, we had a very close call here in the valley. Our rivers, our waterways, the lakes were at an exceptionally high level with the heat dome, the ridiculous heat that we all experienced and went through. and we saw melt at a rate that we've never seen before. We were very fortunate that our rivers peaked when they did, and that the melt and the freshet peaked when it did. But I do want to take this opportunity as well to thank our staff, our emergency personnel, Sarah Tays, our CAO, Ms. Gilmore and her management team, Public Works, Fire, all of our staff that all stepped up, our Public Works, I think I said that already, it stepped up in all their way to help protect our community. It was a lot of long hours, and we are very fortunate to have these folks working on our behalf. And along those lines, also, what was very notable was the collaboration between our staff and our communities. So our collaborative work with the SLRD, with Lilwat Nation, their emergency response crews, and with the Pemberton Valley Diking District. A lot of hard work went in there. A special shout out to Kevin Clark from the Diking District, who spent many sleepless hours out there. I know he went a couple of days without sleep and was just out there constantly working on our behalf. So thanks to everybody for all the hard work and the collaboration on that. And I'm happy to report that we weathered it well. But it's a reminder, I think, an easy reminder of the impacts of climate change and the work that we want to do here at the village in climate change and some of the actions that we want to take. And it's a reminder of the geography we live in. And maybe I could just remind all of us the importance of being ready. First of all, being very careful in the backcountry, and then as residents being ready to evacuate, to respond to whatever situation we're facing, whether it's having that go bag for the really quick evacuation, the evacuation kit, all those things are really important, and we have all that information available through the village, and we're happy to provide it. But it's, I think what we've seen recently just points to the importance of all that. Kind of on that topic a little bit, I know there's been a lot of conversation about the return of rail service to our area. So I just wanted to touch on that really quickly. CAO and staff have reached out to CN over the last week or so when we were informed that rail service was going to be rerouted through the Sea to Sky corridor. It's gotten a lot of press, and we've certainly made our case to CN, and they have responded, assuring us that they will have increased inspections, increased presence, fire suppression measures out on the rails as we look at having some of these freight trains rerouted to the Sea to Sky corridor. We're looking at a couple trains a day right now, and we were very clear about our concerns around vegetation control, seeing as how the line has been closed for the last year plus. So we're still out there making the case, and there has been a lot of back and forth with CN on that. Other topics, before the end of the school year, I was invited to a French socials class at PSS to talk about municipal level of government. I was, our MLA, MP, and the chair of the SLRD had also visited either in person or through Zoom to this class. And I was there to wrap it up to talk about municipal government and how young people can get involved, how we impact the lives of young people. And there's some really great conversation. They were really quite engaged. It was a grade 10 class. And the conversation, one of the reasons I bring it up is the conversation led to discussion around the recent tensions with teenagers and police and some of the activities late at night. And it was a really great conversation. And the kids brought up, or the teens brought up some really, really sharp points in terms of how they feel misrepresented and want to, just as much as everybody else, solve the tensions and the optics that are surrounding the whole situation. Some of them were excited about the idea of perhaps being able to speak directly with the police and wondering if we could facilitate something like that. So it was a really good conversation, and I'm hopeful that we don't lose all momentum through the course of the summer. There's a couple of kids that said, they're teenagers that said they would stay in contact, perhaps carry the conversation on. If not, we'll pick it back up in September, but it was a really great conversation. A couple of ministers' meetings. I touched on one earlier regarding Mr. Osborne, and one of the main topics was regarding electronic meetings and electronic public hearings. Right now it's status quo. Basically, what we're being told is that staff will be given information as to how to manage meetings moving forward. We will be given 90 days after the state of emergency is lifted to make that transition. And as we're waiting for that to happen, again, staff has been given some of the information so that they can make permanent changes and bring permanent changes forward to us, to our procedures bylaw. Also on that meeting, we were assured that the infrastructure grant announcements will be coming soon. So hopefully some of our grant applications will find out the results of that very soon. Also, ministers meeting with Mr. Eby surrounding housing. We talked a little bit about our project and the challenges with affordable housing projects in communities. And there's funding coming forward for more supportive type housing and complex care. So I don't know if that will apply to some of the needs we have here, but we'll be watching for that. VCH meetings has been mostly around immunization, which I think we're all fairly up to date on, but maybe one item is that as numbers have dropped in COVID infections, VCH is picking up the surgeries that have been left, that have been falling behind over the last 15 months or so. So surgeries are starting to increase, which is really good news. And hopefully they can start catching up in that respect. PVIS meeting, I'll Councillor Zantz take that one. And then lastly, I attended an SLRD meeting. We had a delegation from BC Hydro on that meeting, and it was around the Cheakamus water use and a review on that. It was really quite interesting because it balanced, you know, we heard about how they try to balance considerations around First Nations fish recreation while trying to ensure enough water for power, you know, competitive power uses between, you know, power, flooding, all that sort of thing. So it was a really interesting report on that. A couple quick notes. Divine Transfer Station has updated their fees and charges. Anderson Lake Dock, Director Mack has put a total of $10,000 from a couple funds towards a pad, portable toilet, picnic tables, and extensive signage around the Anderson Lake Dock to provide some more services and protect the residents in that area. We got our Q1 financials, fairly straightforward as it's the first quarter. We also saw the SOFI report as we did tonight. We got an update on the IAP2 work that's being done at the SLRD. So like us here at the village, the regional district is engaged in the IAP2 communications program, and the next steps there are to do a survey on community engagement and performance and work with that. So that'll be coming near the end of the year. Committee of the whole for the SLRD, we got a report on the meeting in Owl Ridge regarding the logging activities going on behind there. It sounds like Clay fielded a lot of questions around rock slides and sight lines, and also sort of gave some numbers to the hauling. So it sounds like there'll be about 40 trucks over the course of 5 to 8 days, mostly at the bottom of the road. There's concern from residents on wear and tear on the road. I'm sure Councillor Antonelli has some to add to that, so I'll leave it there. And the main topic, Committee of the Whole, was once again Tiger Bay developments. So reported on this a number of times. Tiger Bay developments in South Britannia, before it is to come forward for first reading and then potentially public hearings, the board has sent them back with considerations a couple times around things like details around the transit hub, details around trail connectivity, the level of density, the timing or phasing of childcare supply, phasing of staff and affordable housing. So some of these issues I've mentioned before, and they were brought up. Tiger Bay came back to Committee of the Whole with some thoughts and detail on that, and what wasn't addressed has been agreed to be addressed in a term letter secured by a 219 covenant, which means they can not build or get a development permit until the conditions of the term letter are fulfilled. And those conditions will once again include more detail on the things I just mentioned. The board was pretty clear that we want a fair level of detail before approving first reading and sending it to public hearing. But it sounds like Tiger Bay Developments has heard the concerns and will be bringing that forward to the board for consideration at an upcoming meeting. I feel like there's more. I think that's it for me. It's been a hot stretch. We're seeing an increase in visitation. It's great to see tourists back. It's also unfortunate that we're so on edge in terms of our fire concerns. But I just encourage everybody to get out and enjoy some summer, stay cool, stay hydrated, jump in the lake. And that's all I got. Any council reports? Councilor Craddock, go ahead.
Thanks very much, Mayor Richmond. I went out with Clay Tyndall from the Spelkooten Community Forest. He took me on a tour of the sites that we have in partnership with Little What Nation. It was a great opportunity to ask him an awful lot of questions over the 5 hours or 4 hours that we were together. Some of the topics were access to the timber, value of different species and what species were in each area, future opportunities to purchase other woodlot licenses, which they're in negotiations on right now and looking forward to that. Future costs of road building and putting bridges in, and the fact that we should be doing that in the first year or two, so that 2 or 3 or 4 years down the road, that'll be in place and it'll make it easier to get in and do some harvesting. Overhead costs and how that breaks down to basically administration all the way through to trucking and harvesting. We talked about local purchasing and how people locally would be able to apply to pick up product locally, which would save some transportation costs for us. And the other thing Clay is really high on and really wants to see happen in a responsible way is replanting of any place that we're harvesting. His general feeling is that if we do proper harvesting and proper replanting, that forest will be there for people of Pemberton for a long time to come. He said most times at 40 years you can start harvesting again. So as we work through this area, he says it'll be there for long term and it'll be great for future members of the community. So it was a great opportunity to be with him. I'm sure he was tired of my questions by the end of the day, but I learned a lot and I'm glad I had the opportunity to go out. We saw the cut out at Owl Ridge, and again, I think Ms. Antonelli will probably speak on that later. So he was happy with the meeting that they had. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Antonelli.
Yeah, more on the community forest. So I attended that meeting with the Clay Tyndall and the residents of Owl Ridge regarding the proposed cut block at the beginning of the road. And Clay Tyndall did a really good job of addressing the concerns. So one of the main concerns was rockfall, and there was a geotechnical report prepared specifically for that cut block, and there's not a lot of hazard. So overall, I would say there's some reasonable local support for harvesting that block. But that said, there were still quite a few concerns that were outstanding. So one of them, I guess the main one focuses around the representation that people in Area C are getting on the board of the community forest, because the SLRD, as you know, is not represented on that board. So it leaves it up to the residents to coordinate and bring concerns forward. And so I guess just looking at I mentioned this before, the cumulative impacts to the area. If you don't live there, you wouldn't understand that the Loa Nation is doing logging in other areas right near there. There's some private logging going on. There's also flagging by someone, no one's entirely sure who, but it comes right up to property lines, and I assume it's for fire safety. But so all these activities are going on, and there's no one really representing the communities. Yeah, it's just something that we need to address in how the community forest is organized from here on in. We had some talk about where the next logging will take place, because there was that discussion about increasing this year's cut because of the lumber prices. And I was told that logging will be taking place, or could potentially, near Cedar Grove. And then the question came up, well, who's representing the neighbors in that area, and who knows about the cumulative impacts in that area. But yeah, just to summarize, I think locally the one cut block that's slated for potentially this year, I think it has some reasonable support, but there's a lot of work to be done in representing Area C.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Zant?
Just trying to bring up my agenda here from the previous meeting, but it seems like these computer troubles are contagious. So I'll go with some of my notes I made from the meeting. We had a presentation from Margot Vaughn of the Pemmican Secondary School Parent Advisory Committee. She zoomed in to say thank you for our financial support behind the sunshade. Mark Mendonca presented on the Pemberton TV Society and dissolving the society. They were unable to put an AGM together, so unfortunately I had to dissolve the society, and there was a conversation regarding around hanging on to the radio capabilities. As we've seen recently, the emergency services can rely heavily on radio networks. There was a brief discussion on the Canoe Club and their funding eligibility, if I remember correctly, and their next 3 years for their term, and the funding coming out of the PDIF fund. And one other thing I can remember is that there was the update to the PDIF fund for changing the reporting date from November to December. I apologize, I'm still not able to bring up my agenda. It's about all I can remember from my notes. If there's any gaps, I'm sure there are. Happy to hear them.
Thank you. Maybe just to fill in a couple of spaces. So yeah, as Councillor Zant said, there was a lot of discussion around PDIF funding. So the Canoe Club was provided some funding. There was some discussion around how BMX and Porca move forward. But significantly, there was discussion around how the fund looks over the next years to come. So if you recall, one of the problems we ran into last year, so if you recall, we have two funds. There's the commercial, or economic development rather, and arts and culture. And the economic development was oversubscribed. We were able to fund the group's applications because there was a little bit of carryover, but looking ahead to next year, there's not enough available in that fund to finance both all of the Chamber, Tourism Pemberton, and the farmers market within the $50,000 fund that exists. So a few options were looked at in terms of how we can look at that over the years to come. In the short term, the funding request from the farmers market has been moved over to arts and culture, where it feels it's more appropriate. And that leaves enough room to continue funding Tourism Pemberton and Chamber of Commerce at the current level. So it sort of cleans things up for the time being. And the discussion was around the future and whether or not tourism and economic development and Chamber of Commerce, whether that should be more of a taxation line item rather than something that comes out of grants and aids through the PDIF. So that's something we've asked staff to bring back to look at, perhaps creating a service or some way of funding economic development through some of these groups on a regular basis as part of the budget as opposed to grants and aid. So that's a conversation that's going to come back as well through Phoebus. Anyone else? All right, see none, thank you. We're on to correspondence for action. We have two letters regarding expressing opposition to the basketball court in the downtown area. The recommendation is to direct staff to respond to them. Any comments or a motion on that? I would say that obviously a motion to respond. I would like to perhaps include the thoughts in there, or have staff consider the thoughts in there that the basketball court will be built very thoughtfully, and the impacts to neighbors will be very much considered. Fencing, buffering, seats to make it inclusive, to make it a real community asset will certainly be considered. And I would also suggest that, as I've said before, that, healthy communities, complete communities are built around playgrounds, outdoor hockey rinks, basketball courts, schools, that sort of thing. And it certainly represents a change to neighborhoods perhaps, but I feel like we can do this thoughtfully and manage it thoughtfully to make sure that the impacts to the neighbors are minimal. Councillor Noble, go ahead.
I mostly want to echo the same sentiments. I think that most of the issues that were brought up here are things that we can easily manage. I don't think garbage should be a problem. We're going to have facilities right there for all that. We've already got it in the plans to have proper washrooms at the barn soon enough, so porta potties will be temporary. And I do hope we'll be mindful with the lighting to make it in such a way it doesn't spill in the wrong directions. And yeah, I just think it is very important to have some things for the youth in town, because we know they hang out. There's been some talk about that. And I don't think we need to restrict them more or be sending them down a dark highway to a distant place for a simple activity that's low impact. So I think we can definitely manage most of these issues quite easily.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't know if any of you have ever hung out by Kitts Beach Court or any of the courts in the city, but it's a good scene. Like, it's a really good activity, good energy there, and people of all ages watching, and it's good fun. So I'm hopeful that we could build something like that on a smaller scale. So the recommendation is that for both of these, I guess we could do them separately, Ms. Fraser. So the first one is in response to Ms. Sharon Bishop. So the recommendation is that staff respond to Ms. Bishop's correspondence. Moved by Councillor Noble, seconded by Councillor Zant. Discussion. Any opposed? Motion carries. And similarly, a motion to respond to Ms. Sophie Rivers' correspondence. Moved by Councillor Noble, seconded by Councillor Zant. Any discussion? Any opposed? Motion carries. We have 11 correspondence for information. Would anybody like to pull any of them out? Seeing none, can I get a motion to receive? Oh, go ahead, Councillor Craddock.
No, receive and file.
Receive and file 1 to 11, moved by Councillor Craddock, second by
I was actually going to suggest we pull out the safe passing distance one, if there's any way we can support that.
what number is that?
I don't have that handy little
Hang on a
thing
sec.
on my agenda this time, but there's quite a few pages on that.
Let me just find it and we'll pull it out.
Is this the drivers, the 1 meter space? So
Number 7.
Yes,
Okay, so motion to receive and file correspondence 1 to 6 and 8 to 11, moved by Councillor Craddock.
Second.
By Councillor Zant. Further discussion? Any opposed? Motion carries. Number 7, go ahead, Councillor Noble.
I'd just like to see council support this in any way we can. I'm not sure what that would look like. I mean, we can go vote for it at UBCM, I suppose. But I do want to see support in a form of a letter or whatever we can do, because I do think this is important. I have gotten to travel in countries that have that law, and it was really nice to see, and traffic was so respectful and safe compared to what I've seen in other places, including here. And so I think it would be a really good thing to support.
Okay, so the letter is actually presenting a resolution and looking for endorsement of it. So at this point, it would be looking for UBC
it's-
members to endorse it at the conference. So that's obviously a possibility for all of us.
Okay.
Did you want any further action on that? That's what's come through this correspondence.
No, I think that's fine if that's the only action that we have at this point.
Okay, so we will receive that as well then. Moved by Councillor Noble, seconded by Councillor Zant. Any opposed? Motion carries. Decision on late business. Late business, notice of motion, question period. Those in attendance who wish to ask questions, please click on the raise hand feature in the webinar controls. This will notify village staff that you would like to ask a question, and staff will unmute your microphone when it's your turn to speak. Please be reminded that only questions directly related to items discussed during this meeting will be permitted. Ms. Kennedy, any takers?
Mayor Richmond and I don't see any questions at this point.
If there's no questions, then I will look for a motion to go back in camera. Councillor Craddock, seconded by Councillor Noble. Any discussion? Any opposed? Motion carries. Do you need a couple minutes, Sheena, just to reset?
Yeah, please.
Got it.
And then you need to unlock.
Where's that?
You click on more,
Click on what? Click on what, sorry?
unlock webinar.
I don't see that. Where am I looking for that function?
Go under yours as more. No,
Say again?
go to your name and there should be a more button.
Thought he knew how to drive.
I know. Now you've muted yourself. It's a good thing we're recording.
Yeah. No, when I go to more, it just asks me to rename. It doesn't give me the opportunity.
Oh, we'll just go for it then.
Oh, wait, hang on here. Here's this lock webinar.
Could be on the very bottom. Are there dots on the very
Oh, I've
bottom of the
unlocked the
white?
meeting. We've done it. And with all that, now I'll look for a motion to adjourn. Councillor Noble, seconded by Councillor Craddock. Any opposed? Meeting's adjourned. Thanks very much for the day, everybody. Have a great night.
See you later.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you.